welcome to the Encore webinar series. I'm Mark Blevis, Director of Public Affairs and Marketing for the National Office of Commissionaires. Our speaker today is Don Thompson, Director of Operations with our Hamilton Division. Don began his military career with the 1st Battalion Nova Scotia Highlanders in April 1984, a reserve unit, and enrolled in the Reg Force in April 1988. He joined Commissionaires for the first of two times, after being medically released in 1991. Working on many high-profile contracts from the RCMP J Division to securing the Stanley Cup. Hopefully he has a chance to tell us a bit more about that. In 1995, Don moved to Calgary and spent 19 years in increasingly senior positions within the security industry, and he's now in his second stint with the Corps, which began when he moved to Kitchener in 2014. He's worked his way through the ranks from guard to his current role, Director of Operations. If you have any questions for Don during his presentation, please send them to our meeting organizer, Lisa Dion. I don't know why I trip on that each week. Don, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Mark, and I will also field questions for John, whoever that may be. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to give a bit of an introduction to myself, to grow off of or to expand on my introduction is, as I started out, and as Mark mentioned, through the military, I had started actually in Army cadets as a child, because that was one of the school curriculum items, and it was a great way of getting out of class. 5 years of that, straight into the reserves, 4 years with the reserves, and then straight into the Reg Force. And unfortunately, due to medical reasons, the career I had envisioned didn't pan out the way I had hoped. So when I came back to Canada from Germany in 1991, I had a new wife and a new child in tow. And the purpose of, I guess, the conversation today is to try to capture some of the struggles that I had. And hopefully they'll have some relevance to people that are watching today, as far as the need to determine your worth and how you're viewed by the civilian workplace. So there's plenty to discuss and lots of ground to go over, but Mark, if you have any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
I have nothing right now. I think what we'll do is we'll let you walk through some of your history, and then those questions will no doubt come.
Great. So as I said, when I came back to Canada, one of the biggest problems that I had coming out of the combat arms was to have any sort of way of even knowing how to write a resume, or making myself palatable or at least marketable to the civilian work world. There were certainly no cell phones, no internet, no ready access to those sorts of services. And to be honest, I had reached out a couple of times to organizations who really struggled to try to put this square peg into a round hole that would be attractive to civilian recruiters. So that said, I floundered quite badly for about a year until the opportunity to join Commissionaires New Brunswick arrived. I got out of the military at CFP Gagetown in New Brunswick. I wound up settling in Fredericton with my wife and her family, and it was only by sheer happenstance that the opportunity to join the Commissionaires came about, and it was brought to my attention that perhaps that might be the way to go. Those of you who know the Commissionaires and are familiar with, in the early to late 90s and into the 2000s, only ex-military and ex-RCMP were employed. So it was a very straightforward transition for them to look at my military experience and understand that I would have value to the organization. In that context, I was hired almost immediately and began to build the experience that I would need going forward from a security industry standpoint. As Mark mentioned, I was given several different taskings of increasingly senior responsibility, starting out as a regular Commissionaire guard, all the way to working for the New Brunswick legislature when they're in session, to, as Mark mentioned, working with RCMP J Division for quite some time, doing access control with them, being seconded to a media public relations inquiry, doing media escorts in and out and witnesses, all the way to, as he said, securing the Stanley Cup when it came around on its centennial tour through Canada in 1993. A great opportunity, obviously, being a lot of photo ops, meeting Hockey Hall of Famers. It was great for me as a sports fan. That was kind of my crowning achievement to date in the security industry at that time. So as I said, once the time came to move to the West, I had that security industry background under my belt, and I leveraged that into other security providers, the major players in the industry, Paladin, G4S, working with the city of Calgary in the security aspect, and then being headhunted from out of there by G4S as their operations manager and acting general manager in the early 2000s. So for me, the takeaway from all that was that without that bridge between the military world and the civilian world that was presented by Commissionaires New Brunswick, really, I'm not exactly sure how that would have all gone down, because there were no resources, as I stated, but the culture of the Commissionaires was very understanding, very welcoming, and very familiar for somebody coming out of the military environment. And I know that that is still true to this day. As Mark mentioned, I am the Director of Operations. However, I'm also the acting CEO on occasion. Matter of fact, I am today here for the Hamilton Division. And it's not just my journey that results in this, the opportunity for progression and career advancement with Commissionaires, but our previous CEO started out as a guard as well in the guard ranks and worked his way up to that rank for the last decade. So to me, it demonstrates very clearly that Commissionaires has that sort of mandate and that opportunity for people coming out of the military to go to a culture that they're familiar with, the rank structures, the camaraderie of fellow service members, and allowing you to transition and move into a role that will obviously be beneficial going forward, no matter where your career path might take you.
You've already kind of hinted, Don, that you started off as a guard, you worked your way up to Director of Operations. In recent memory, we've had a couple of CEOs who started off at guards and worked up to the level of CEO. What opportunities exist for veterans within, and I know this is very commissioner centric, but I want to make sure that veterans understand that when you leave the military and you go into the civilian workforce, there are a breadth of opportunities. I wonder if you might cover off from your experience what some of those opportunities are.
Absolutely, and really the opportunities are unlimited when it comes to your own personal skill sets. We've got people as veterans who have a strong administrative background. They might have performed an administrative role in the military, transitioned directly into those types of support roles with HQ, or even at a site level as well. You've got people who have organizational or strategic skill sets that they bring from the military that wind up going into that exact same sort of transition mode with Commissionaires. I can only speak for my experiences and what opportunities are available, but as everyone here may or may not know, we're the smallest division in the country, and those types of opportunities are readily available with us. I can only imagine what the opportunities might be in a large division with different layers and stratas, subgroups, and divisional breakdowns. So I know for a fact that the leadership skills that you have learned in the military, the planning and strategic opportunities you've been exposed to, the courses, the training, the certifications, all of those things will build a resume that will be quite impressive to Commissionaires as a whole and easily understood and translated, as opposed to what other organizations might be able to see as far as your value.
So you brought up resume again. You talked about it earlier when you left the forces and trying to assemble a resume at the time. Was it difficult for you to articulate and translate your military skills and experience into civilian language?
It's extremely difficult, and I have colleagues who to this day struggle with that as they moved on to NGOs and other types of military or militaristic or paramilitary groups throughout the world. For people going into the civilian workforce, you really struggle to try to understand what you would be able to offer to an organization. But once you actually sit and think about it a little bit, a lot of the skill sets that you've learned in the military are directly transferable, but it requires you looking at it in a very different way than what you used to looking at it is, and it's the application of those skills as well. Leadership is first and foremost off the right off the beginning, but it's not just from a leadership standpoint. I mean, you're exposed to so many different learnings and technical abilities and just working within a team itself. All of those things are in high demand these days with organizations, but it's a matter of translating those skills into something that people can understand. And I think Commissionaires does a great job of that specifically.
Was the trajectory that you followed, from entry level to senior, was that a difficult trajectory to follow?
It was, because as you go from company to company, you're basically starting at ground level each time until you've demonstrated your abilities, or demonstrated worth, and you're given the opportunities. And here, I'll be the first to admit that my guard interview for Commissionaires Hamilton didn't go very well. My skill set was obviously at that point was at a level that needed to have a little bit more exposure, a little better deployed, and my interview for Director of Operations obviously went very well. But as far as the route, the path, and how that all transpired, it's very circuitous. I mean, you come into an opportunity and you address the need, whatever the need is at that time. That's what that company is hiring for, and it may be them trying to put you in a situation where you're not going to be successful. But I know with Commissionaires, there'll be always the incentive to get you into a situation that you will be successful in. That's what a lot of our vetting and screening and training goes into. Where is the best fit for this individual? And speaking from personal experience, we do a lot of work around that very thing. We go into a lot of depth and detail about where is this person going to be successful, and we try our very best to make sure that they're positioned for the greatest amount of success.
I want to throw one more question at you before we open it up to the floor. Something very interesting is happening in London right now, which we've been tracking, and it relates to a parking contract. And I won't get into the specifics, but it's been very interesting to see online the discussion about the importance of employing veterans. Again, I'm throwing back to Commissionaires, the organization that employs us both, because we are the largest private sector employer of veterans. And I'm curious as to what, as a military veteran yourself, what is the importance of the workplace culture for veterans, and to know that there is a place to go to where people, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but because you and I have spoken in the past, about speaking a common language, a familiar language.
I think that can't be overstated. I feel that if someone from the military runs into another member of the military, regardless of the branch, regardless of the type of service, there's that shared commonality of experience that really, if you haven't gone through it, you can't relate to it. So it's very difficult for someone who hasn't gone through the fire, so to speak, to be able to understand what the other person may have gone through, or have those shared common languages even, to make that person feel welcome, to make that new individual feel that they are at home, they're among friends, so to speak. But I know a lot of it is an alienation piece. When you leave the military, you feel that nobody can relate, your family doesn't understand, coworkers and that sort of thing don't get what the military is about or what you've gone through. And then certainly with the heavy emphasis that we place on veteran employment, that certainly isn't the case with Commissionaires. You know you're going to be speaking to people that have shared experiences, and that's a pretty comforting thing when you're going out into the big bad world and trying to make your way.
I got to throw one more out at you, because I'm a civilian myself, and I know that there's the Army, there's the Navy, and the Air Force. Do you find that there's a common language as a veteran of the combat arms that you can still speak to the Navy and Air Force folks, or is that verboten?
I think the common language is that we bust on each other, but it's all in good fun. I mean, no matter what unit you're with, everybody else's unit, is inferior to yours. And but the difference is that it's done in a good-natured way. We all know that we joined for one reason and one reason only, and we continue to feel that way about our country, and we continue to feel the way about service. That service mindset is the one common thread that ties everyone together. When you have someone who has done well or has joined the military and acquitted themselves honorably, they're going to have that same service mindset for their client, regardless of who the client is, and for their coworkers as well.
Lisa, are there any questions from the floor?
Yes, so from Matt, Commissionaires is not exclusively veterans. Your workplace is a mix of veterans and civilians, though most of the leadership is veteran. What is the relationship between veterans and civilians?
That's a great question, and I have to be honest, it really is personality based. I have civilians I work with that have no idea that I've been in the military. I have other civilians that work with me that are very interested in what I've done and ask all sorts of questions, much more probing than even Mark's. And then I have others that it doesn't become a factor. They're aware, but there's no discriminatory hiring practices. There's no preferential treatments. It's basically, this is something that I've done. It's something that's held in high regard by the organization we both work for. And if that's of interest, will answer the odd question. But overall, it doesn't become a factor unless that individual has some sort of other agenda for their inquiry. But certainly, especially here in Commissionaires Hamilton, we're very happy to hire civilians. We're very happy to hire veterans. We're very happy to hire people that have that same mindset, that service first mindset. That's what it's all about. If you have that outlook on life, we're going to get along famously.
That's great. Thank you, Don. Next, are there any other questions, Lisa?
Yes, so from Brooke, I understand that the Federation of Commissionaires is composed of 15 independent divisions. How are strategic objects of the Corps as a whole managed without a centralized headquarter or command?
We only have a few minutes to speak, so I'll give a very high-level answer to that, and that is there's a lot of cooperation across the divisions. We have a number of committees, and the major committees, the most significant ones that run across the Federation, the 15 divisions. One committee is the CEOs. So the CEOs meet on a regular basis to discuss matters of operation and business decisions, and contract decisions, sharing contracts in some cases. And then the other one, of course, is the National Board. And the National Board is made up of the board chairs from each of the 15 divisions. So there's, there tends to be a complex governance structure, and yet it works. And so at the National Board level, they discuss more policy and governance decisions and some of the decisions that would drive some of the work that the NBMC oversees. Don, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with us today. And thank you in advance for answering the questions through email. We'll make sure that they get to you. So with that, it's 12:51 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day.